Both. Ellie, Trump is stoking mistrust in institutions, so much so he is now convinced at least some portion of his base that federal archivists are to blame for his misdeeds. How did we get to the point where attacks on civil servants have just become the norm in Trump world?
Yeah, Joe Biden called these people semi-fascist, and as usual, Joe Biden was being semi-nice. He need not be, right? What Trump does is give aid and comfort and direction to white domestic terrorists who we already know have attacked government buildings on his, if not say so, certainly with his, tacit support. And they're doing it again right now. They're going after the National Archives. We already saw they went after the FBI agents. And as this ramps up, one thing that I think that we have to understand what's going on just beneath the surface here. Trump is in deep legal trouble, all right? He has likely violated the Espionage Act. That carries real penalties and real prison time. He's in deep, deep trouble. One of the only ways he thinks that he can stay out of jail is if the people who are responsible for putting him in jail are so afraid of his white domestic terrorist fans that they let politics cloud their judgment of the law. Now, I don't think that's going to ultimately happen, but that is the play here, and that is, I think, one of the reasons why we're seeing this increased threat level across our government agencies, because it's one of the only ways Trump has left in his mind to keep himself out of jail.
Joyce, my colleague Alex Witt asked Congressman Ted Lieu about a federal judge's inclination to appoint a special master. Take a listen.
As a member of Congress, I also have security clearance. If I had hundreds of classified documents in my home, I would have been arrested and indicted by now. Now, in terms of the special master being appointed, if that were to happen, I wouldn't have any objection to that, because the special master is going to find the same thing that the Department of Justice found, which is that Donald Trump had hundreds of documents at Mar-a-Lago that were labeled confidential, secret, top secret, and then levels beyond top secret at the highest classification levels. That is a crime, if true.
Joyce, I want your thoughts on the special master. I've heard sort of a variety of opinions, even from our own legal analysts, on how unusual this is, how usual or unusual the 2-week delay in request is, how this could potentially change the process, and also just the reality that the judge who is making this decision is a Trump-appointed judge.
This is not the typical situation where you see a special master being used following a search. Special masters are used when there's a search that's likely to find a large quantity of attorney-client privileged material. For instance, when you're searching an attorney's office or searching an attorney's phone. And in those situations, the parties will typically, very close to the time of the search, ask that a special master come in and review the documents. But what happened here is that DOJ is using a filter team. That's a group of DOJ prosecutors who are completely walled off from the substantive investigation into Trump and classified documents, and their only role is to screen these materials to determine whether there's anything privileged that needs to go back to the former president and that the lawyers working on the case shouldn't see. So that's their role in this setting. And the 11th Circuit just last year issued an opinion acknowledging that the use of filter teams is constitutionally sufficient and doesn't deprive the putative defendant of any of his or her rights in that setting. So really there's no need here to appoint a special master, particularly given how late in the proceedings these are. DOJ is likely, if not done reviewing the documents, then very, very close. It's tough to see what a special master could do here other than impose delay. And Alicia, I want to make one last point here, because so often our inclination is to say, well, that's a Trump judge or that's an Obama judge. And the reality is that every federal judge is appointed by one president for one or the other of the parties. We give our judges life tenure for that reason, so that once they're appointed by the president from the party that puts them on the bench, they can leave that world behind and make independent judges. And again, following the 2020 election, we saw judges who had been put on the bench by the former president and other Republicans look at cases and make decisions based on the law and the facts. So I'm not ready to say that this judge will act out of allegiance to Trump. I think that would be dangerous and damaging to our judicial system and to our democratic institutions to do that. And that, to the point of the question that you asked, Ellie, is exactly what Donald Trump does. He compromises our confidence in institutions, whether it was the FBI and the intelligence community during his presidency, or now this utter insanity of saying that folks at the National Archives are acting out of political motives. I think this judge will make the right decision based on the law and the facts, and I think DOJ will do the same thing when it comes to deciding whether or not to indict the former president.